Hello, everybody. Today, you're going to want to get a piece of paper out for you or digitally or literal paper, to take notes on some important things you're going to need to know for almost the rest of the next semester and definitely next year. So I would get that ready if you haven't already. Um, so here we go. Today, we're going to be talking about rhetoric. But before I start blabbing about it, what do you know about it already? Let me know in the text box. What is your knowledge of rhetoric thus far, if any? And how about Aristotle? Know anything about that guy? Tell me in the text box. And what about logos, pathos, or ethos? Or athos, however you want to pronounce that. Both are correct. Know anything about those? Let me know in the text box. So, no matter where you are on understanding rhetoric, there's always more to learn. You could get a PhD in it. And in fact, it's a very important skill, and one of the most important ones that you could possibly learn that's going to affect your entire life. And it does have to do with the power of words, as we started talking in class about how words are a kind of magical spell, a kind of an ability to manipulate and shape thoughts and actions in other human beings. In fact, it's the closest thing to magic that we have. And the famous author Nathaniel Hawthorne, who this is not a picture of, he said, "Words, so innocent and powerless as they are, as standing in a dictionary, how potent for good and evil they become in the hands of one who knows how to combine them." And I think that the videos that we watched in class about how both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders use their words to cause action and shape thought, it's clear that that is true. That words are a very powerful tool or weapon. And this gentleman here is a photograph of a very famous actor named Marlon Brando playing Shakespeare's version of the historical figure of Mark Antony. And if you don't know who Mark Antony is, he's one of the most important people in the course of Western history because of his mouth, because of what he said at the funeral of Julius Caesar. He was a master rhetorician, someone who is a master wizard of words. And his father was actually like one of the top rhetorical teachers in all of Rome that hung out with another famous Roman named Cicero. So his words actually ended the Roman Republic. It was on the precipice of being lost anyway, and there was a coup d'etat, literally, where Julius Caesar's friends and frenemies and enemies, about 23 of them, I think, stabbed him to death on the Capitol building because they thought he was going to destroy the Roman Republic and turn it into an empire, turn it into something of like a kind of a royal house where he would be king or emperor. And they were probably right to worry about that. And they did assassinate him, and they were on the edge of winning and taking over and trying to bring back the Roman Republic. And the guy named Marcus Brutus, who was a very close friend of Julius Caesar, allowed Mark Antony, who was like his right hand, Julius Caesar's right hand man, to speak at a funeral. That was a mistake, because there was a huge crowd of all the citizens, in front of the Capitol building, and he gave a big speech. And that speech changed history forever. It set Rome on fire. It sent people into a frenzy where they went on a murderous rampage to revenge the murder of Julius Caesar. And it made the people who tried to save the Republic by killing Julius Caesar run for their lives, and they did not make it. And that was the end of the Roman Republic. They were no longer a democracy. They were a kingdom, and Mark Antony was one of a triumvirate of rulers, and then ended up got killed by one of the other ones, and Julius Caesar's grandnephew, Augustus Caesar Octavian, before he became emperor, was the one who started the empire. So that was the end of a democracy at the Capitol building with words. That should try to put a little hair on your neck, standing up. Pretty crazy. And so it changed the course of history with one speech. Pretty crazy. So, how did he become so amazing at his speaking skills that he could change history with his mouth? Well, this guy, Aristotle. Aristotle was a teacher a few hundred years before Mark Antony was even born, so maybe say 250 years older-ish. And he was a one of the great three early Greek philosophers that are the Socrates, Plato, Aristotle are kind of known as like the big three. Of course, there were ones before that and ones after that, but those are kind of like the biggies. Socrates, we've talked about. Plato was his student, and then Plato's student was Aristotle. And Aristotle came to be a very important teacher who wrote a lot about how to teach budding citizens, his students, to be great leaders of Greece and Macedonia, wherever else he was teaching. And so he actually shaped the world also by being a teacher of Alexander the Great, who used his might and his mouth to kind of conquer the known world at that time for the Greeks. Of course, there's more world than that, but he made it all the way to India, took over Egypt, in fact, changed the Egyptian pharaohs to be Greek origin, Macedonian origin, the Ptolemies. So, a very important person, and a lot of Aristotle's works were burned in the Library of Alexandria, but we do have a lot of his lecture notes. And luckily, we do have his lecture notes on how to teach rhetoric. And that has been the foundation for a lot of the rhetorical teaching to this day. So he's been an influential force for centuries on many subjects. He's kind of like the grandpa of science. Definitely the foundational teacher of rhetoric, even though he was not a sophist, which are kind of more the experts on rhetoric. But he's like the guy that kind of organized all those things into kind of a teachable textbook, if you will. Okay. I'm not going to make you read that, of course, so don't worry. I will give you kind of the snippy, simplistic form of his lecture notes. If you want to learn more later on in college, you totally could take a class or two on rhetoric, or even major in it. And for years, actually, rhetoric was something all students had to take as a separate class. Like you would have rhetoric as, and then learning writing and reading would be a different class. Rhetoric was more about giving speeches and preparing persuasive speeches. And it seems like English teachers now have to teach like everything. So it's been smushed, and unfortunately, because of that, we can't do the job that maybe past students would be masters of it, because it gets smushed and lost in all the other things like poetry and literature and all that stuff. In Shakespeare's day, before he only has about an 8th grade education, although his 8th grade education is more like a bachelor's degree nowadays, it seems. He learned a lot about rhetoric already in middle school that would like blow your mind, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, it's so complicated. And in fact, he uses it in his writing of the play Julius Caesar that we are going to be watching and analyzing a couple of speeches from it. And he actually used his knowledge of rhetoric to kind of make fun of characters and make them look like fools, and to kind of shape his own rhetoric through how he perceived the fall of Julius Caesar and the rise of the rise and fall then of Mark Antony too, because it's in 2 different plays. There's also Antony and Cleopatra after that. But he was also a magical word weaver who was very trained in rhetoric and used it as, even in his literature, as a way to shape his audience and to kind of poke fun. And if you know anything about rhetoric at the degree that he does, you can see those kind of inside jokes. I'm not expecting you guys to, but it's definitely there, and I'll point out some of them out to you when we watch. But in any case, I'll do the best that I can being an English teacher and having to smush it in a small unit. And so rhetoric has this kind of triangular relationship. Aristotle loved threes. I think a lot of people love the number three. And he talked about this kind of tripartite relationship for the three modes of persuasive speech. And he thought that you had, and this would be kind of a metaphorical equilateral triangle where you need to have all three in a balanced way to be fully persuasive and to be a good person. Because, I mean, yeah, you could be heavy handed in one and be effective, but are you being also a good citizen? So it should be moral and persuasive. He thought there needed to be a balance of all three. So we're going to talk about those three things right now. So make sure you've got your paper ready to go now, because we're going to start. You should start taking notes at this point if you haven't already. Okay, here we go. So the first one we're going to talk about is athos or ethos. And this is how you'd write it in Greek. And the reason why there's two pronunciations is it depends on what period of ancient Greece are we talking about. The one that looks kind of like an N with a long leg, that's the eta, and it has a sound, so it's athos. But the epsilon, the little e, is a ethos, like ethics, right? So you might hear different people say athos or ethos. It's or ethos. It's fine, whatever. But in any case, and then that's one of the triangular parts. Another one is logos. Logos. Okay, that's how you would write it in Greek if you care. And then there's pathos. Okay, and that's how you would write it in Greek if you care. Okay, and so we're going to talk about those three parts, and I'm going to use Marvel to help us kind of understand the three parts, the three modes of persuasion. Okay, so we're going to have Athos first, and we're going to have him be Captain America. Okay, another term for this is artistic proof. So there's rhetorical mode or artistic proof, and the word for proof for Aristotle would be pistis, for proof. So it's one of these pistis. Okay, not sure you have to know that, but I took ancient Greek language and I like it, so it's fun. And what it means literally is character. So pistis is like one of the three artistic proofs, but it comes from ethos, has to do with character, okay, or custom or habit, okay. So ethos has to do a lot with like the character of the speaker, okay. And there's three categories. Again, I told you he loves three. Even within athos itself, there's three categories that you could appeal to improve, to prove your character, to prove your trustworthiness, right? If you want to go back here, to show that you're a good guy, like Cap is supposed to be like this kind of like practically perfect human being, right? People trust Cap, right? They know that he wouldn't lie, that he's loyal. So even if you disagree with him, you know he's a good guy. So you're more likely to listen to Cap because of that, right? But there's three things that people, when they're speakers trying to get people to listen to them, to try to say, hey, I'm a trustworthy person, listen to me. There's three categories, okay? So we've got phronesis. Phronesis has to do with useful skills and wisdom. So that's like expertise. So you might appeal to the fact that you're an expert, or that you're smart, or that you know what you're talking about through kind of skill or experience, okay? And then there's arete, which has to do with that you're a virtuous person, that you have goodwill, okay? So arete has to do with virtue. You're a good person. You might be appealing both to you being a good person and that you have skills. You can appeal to one or two or three in your trying to convince the audience that they should listen to you. And then there's eunoia, which has to do specifically with goodwill towards the audience. Okay, that you have a good. It's not just that you're a good person, but that you don't want to harm the audience. So for me to fully trust you as an audience member, I have to believe that you know what you're talking about, that you're a good person, and that you don't want anything from me. You don't want anything bad for me, right? You care about my well-being, at least in a general sense. Okay, you're not trying to manipulate me. If I smell baloney, I'm not going to trust you. If I think that you don't know what you're talking about, that you're not an expert, I'm not going to listen to you. If I don't think that you're a generally good person, I'm not going to listen to you. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are necessarily, or if even your ideas are good. If I don't trust you, I'm not going to listen. So this is kind of the core. It's very important that you establish into the audience that you are trustworthy. Okay, so that's one of the rhetorical modes. Okay. All right. So in the text box, answer the question before we move on. All right, continuing. So ethos of the speaker, though, as I said, is determined by the audience. Okay, you can try to appeal to it to get people to trust you, but it's the reception is what matters. It's the audience's perception of you, the speaker. If the ethos is low, there's no connection. If there's no connection, you can't be persuasive. To have an example that's very silly and full of hyperbole, if Hitler went to Berkeley and wanted to have a speech about the benefits of a vegan lifestyle, because he was one, or at least a vegetarian, is anybody going to listen to him, even if everything he said that day was awesome and right on point and was really good stuff, and he had the experience of being a long time vegetarian? Nope, because he's Hitler, right? There would be no connection. They wouldn't even listen to him, right? So there has to be this kind of trust built before anybody's going to listen to you, or in fact, and do anything that you want them to do. So that's a hard thing to do. Okay. Oops, I don't know why that animated late. And some violations of ethos could include that the speaker has a vested interest or ulterior motive, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever felt like someone's trying to sell you something and you're just like giving them the face of like, yeah, right, buddy. You can just smell that they're not really there for you. They're there for themselves. They're trying to get me to open up my checkbook and write them some, to buy something. You're not really going to have strong ethos if I think you have some other agenda other than the goodwill that you noya, right? So that could be a way to harm your ethos if people can tell you're disingenuous, that you have something else other than their goodwill in mind. Okay. It could also be that the person's not an expert in what they're talking about, right? So if someone who is a newlywed tries to give a speech on how to avoid divorce, you might not listen to them because you're like, how long have you been married? A week. Well, how would you know, person? Right? So that would be something that you have to be able to show in some way that you know what you're talking about and that you're an expert in that field, right? And just because you are a medical doctor, like let's say you are a phlebotomist and you try to give a speech about, I don't know, astrophysics, and the audience knows that, it's going to make them go, oh, what? Oh, I thought you were a blood doctor. Oh, how do you know about black holes? I don't know if I should listen to you. I mean, even if you've got good information, that's not your expertise. So I don't know. Grain of salt with what you're saying. I'm going to have to check on you. So that's another way that you could hurt your ethos, okay? If you're not an expert in what you're talking about. So now let's move on to the second mode. So, second one is going to be logos. And I know you're like, wait a minute, he's a bad guy. But, so logos has to do with logic, with appealing to facts. Okay. Let me get rid of that so you can see it. I don't know why I'm showing that. There we go. Got rid of that thingy. Logos has to do with like the reasoning, the logic, the rationality, right? So Thanos is one of the smartest people in the entire universe, according to Marvel canon, right? He's got tons of brains, and everything that he does in the movie is based on some kind of rational thought. Like he has decided to do these things with his logic, so that's why I'm picking him. Now, can you a logical by itself, is that going to be very good? No, right? Wasn't thinking enough with his heart, right? And he definitely doesn't have credibility. But just for fun, he's Logos because he's super smart, and he does make this kind of logical calculus as to why he's doing what he's doing. Okay, and so for us, come on, PowerPoint, move on. What's going on? It's stuck. Okay, weird. What's going on? There we go. That was weird. Okay. So logos means literally I say. Okay. It also, though, can mean word, speech, reason, discourse. Okay. And it is basically the logic behind the argument, right? So that's why I picked for our Marvel analogy, Thanos. Okay. So it's the logic behind the argument, and to persuade an audience using logical arguments and supportive evidence. So that's the appeal to logos is the kind of factoids, the logic of your argument, research, that kind of stuff, right? So it's the facts. Okay. It's an argument from reason. And as you know, if you saw the movies like with Endgame and all that stuff, he does have some facts to support what he's doing. Billions of people are suffering. Why are they suffering? Because of a lack of resources. So how can I fix that? Reduce the number of people so there's enough resources so that people will flourish. It was a logical argument. He just didn't think about some other things. Okay. Um, and according to Aristotle, logos, it enables the human being to perform as no other animal can. We have the capacity of reason beyond all other animals. And so, as rational beings, although yes, we're emotional too, and we'll get to that in a minute. If the argument doesn't make if an argument doesn't make sense, we're not going to listen. You know, all of us do have a kind of the phrase a priori logic, this kind of innate, born within us logic that we need for things to appeal to for us to listen to you. Like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, you say, clean your room. Why? You know, they want to know why. Why should I clean my room? And you better not say, because I'm going to spank you if you don't. A better argument than that, right? Well, because it stresses out mommy to have a messy room, and it's good for you to be able to find all your toys and not get them broken, and, you know, reason, right? So that's logos. And for Aristotle, he thought that that was actually the final cause for human beings. The reason for us, our purpose in life, is to be rational and to think. So for him, logos is very important, but he also knows it can't work by itself. Okay. Oops. I already said that. And you know, it's all connected. Trust in the speaker is built through ethos, and it enhances the appeal of arguments from reason, right? If I trust you, then I'll start listening to your logical points. If I trust you, I'm going to listen to it, and I'm more likely to maybe even miss mistakes in your logical reasoning because I trust you and I think that you know what you're talking about. So, you know, you can have mistakes in your logos, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your position on that, if people trust you. So, but you've got to have that ethos first, and then you can have the logos help really persuade people to do something or think something. Next, we have pathos, and I'm going to make that Star-Lord because, oh boy, is he full of emotions, right? So pathos has to do with emotions. It actually comes from the word like pathetic, but it doesn't mean like pathetic, like, oh, what a loser. It means like something that can appeal to emotion, something that can make you like feel pity for or feel emotions for. So pathos in Greek means suffering or experience. And as you recall, maybe my logo was pathos mathos, right? To learn is to suffer is to learn, right? So even pathos itself already has that experience in the word. So just saying pathos kind of says pathos mathos. Okay. So it has to do with suffering, emotion, experience. Okay. And it's an appeal to the emotions of the audience and elicits feelings, right? So Pathos is you trying to get the audience to feel something. Because often people won't do anything unless they feel something. They might go, yeah, you're right. All those reasons for why I should exercise are so on point. Is that enough to get them off the chair? Nope. They have to feel it. So I've got to trust you. You have to have solid reasoning. I have to, that's got a good argument with good facts, but you also have to be able to get me to feel some kind of emotion to get me off of my keister. Okay. And as Aristotle said, awakening emotion in the audience so as to induce them to make the judgment desired. So that's your manipulative, massive tool, is getting that emotion to get them to do what you want. Like, you guys have all seen the commercial, In the Eyes of an Angel, right? For the ASPCA with the shaking little puppy, in the cold, and it's playing some like sad song. And you're like, oh, poor puppies. I gotta call and make that phone call and donate my $20 a month, right? So that appealing to emotion, it is the number one thing to cause action. So to get people to agree with you is great, but to get them to do something, gotta have that pathos. Okay. Something you can have emotional appeals through metaphor or storytelling. Oftentimes speakers will start off with a metaphor or a story to kind of hook you in, to get people to kind of go, okay. You could appeal to pathos through your delivery, like how you are acting to get the emotions out of your audience. Okay. Or by telling personal anecdotes, kind of stories about yourself. Audiences love that kind of stuff. So through general storytelling or metaphors, or the way you deliver stuff, or kind of talking about yourself as a kind of like emotional tool to get people to connect with you and get you to do something, really, really works. Watch any good TED Talk and you're going to see these things being used. Okay. So there's three main foci here. The audience's frame of mind matters when you decide which pathos to appeal to, which emotion to appeal to. You also need to think about having emotional variation. If you're just like, I'm crying the whole time, people stop listening. We need dynamic emotions. We need things to kind of like build or shift. So you want to think about how you want to have an emotional variation. Like a lot of TED Talks that are good that you've ever seen, they probably start off with something funny and then they get serious and then they make you cry and then they give you hope, right? There's all these kinds of emotions that they work through. And then the influence of the rhetor has on the emotions of the audience is the ultimate goal of pathos. So you have to be thinking, what is the audience's frame of mind? What kind of, how am I going to be dynamic in the emotional appeals that I'm going to be trying to get the audience to feel, right? And how am I going to get them to do what I want, right? What's going to be the best to get them from where they are at now to where I want them to be? Okay. So Aristotle realized that emotions vary from person to person, right? So sometimes that's the tricky stick, right? It's very important to understand your specific situation. So if you were going to give a speech to try to persuade a bunch of 5-year-olds in Sunday school, is going to be very different than the way you're going to approach teenagers at prom, let's say, versus a bunch of scientists at a board meeting, right? You have to know what the situation is. And the best rhetoricians are the ones that are able to read a room well, to understand what's going on with the people and kind of know where they're at. Okay. So hopefully you understand through the logos, pathos, ethos that you've got to have all three to get people to do what you want. Okay. It starts with ethos. You need to have that logos, but you've got to also appeal to their emotions for it to work and to get them to do anything. And this is kind of like a nice little chart you might want to take a screenshot of or draw. So you might want to pause the video. But the Aristotle's rhetorical triangle here, there's not just the ethos, the logos, pathos, ethos. There's also which is the credibility, right? That has to do with like your tone, your trustworthiness, reputation, your experience. It's not just the logic part where you need reasoning, argumentation, facts, figures, case studies, and stuff like that. And it's not just the emotional impact on the audience, especially through stories. But it's the other thing you need to know is it has to do with another triangle of relationship. The ethos has to do with the speaker, the emotion has to do with the audience, and the logic is kind of like the message itself. So ethos has to do with the speaker, logic is the message, and then the audience is kind of that. The audience is the receiver, right? So there's this kind of relationship between the speaker, the message, and the audience. Sorry, stumbling on my words there. Okay, so there's a relationship between logos, pathos, ethos, and there's also the triangular relationship between the speaker, audience, and message. Okay. So, little quick check here. Which mode of rhetoric do each of these symbols represent, do you think? And why are they fitting? So what do you think those represent? All right, so now I'm going to quiz you. I'm going to be playing this video and pausing, and it's a bunch of political ads from 2016, so it's a little dated. And it's not for, some of them have to do with the presidential ones, some have to do with like local congressmen and stuff. And they're a mix of both, you know, Democrat and Republican commercials. And I'm not trying to say yay, boo about any of them. It's just to kind of test to what are the main rhetorical modes do you think are going on in this, in these commercials, and how do you know that? Right? Because yes, every speaker should have logos, pathos, ethos, but a lot of times we tend to see one that really sticks out, that they think might help get what they want. They tend to either appeal to, you know, the logos, the logical reasoning to try to get you to vote for them, or they try to appeal to your heart. And to make it clear, pathos doesn't have to be just like pity, like the word kind of insinuates. It could be any emotion, humor, anger, jealousy, any emotion at all is pathos. Okay, any emotion. And so they might try to get you to do, you know, they might try to be really heavily handed on their emotional stuff, or they could be trying to rely on, I'm a good guy, I've been in the Senate for 40 years, trust me, you know, that kind of stuff. Or, you know, I'm a pediatrician, I'm a good person, you should vote for me, right? So which one are they appealing to the most? And do you find it effective? Why or why not? So for each of these commercials, I'm going to be asking, what is the main rhetorical mode being used by this ad? And did you find it persuasive? Why or why not? All right, here we go. Let me mute myself. How do I do that?
I'm Jason Kander, and Senator Blunt has been attacking me on guns. Well, in the Army, I learned how to use and respect my rifle. In Afghanistan, I'd volunteer to be an extra gun in a convoy of unarmored SUVs. And in the state legislature, I supported Second Amendment rights. I also believe in background checks so that terrorists can't get their hands on one of these. I approve this message because I'd like to see Senator Blunt do this.
We've got room to put 2,700 people in our jail, and it costs us about $103 a day.
Gerald really doesn't have any hobbies.
Last year's tax rate was 0.4169. This year, we could take that down to 3.838.
So is he always like that?
Yeah, all the time. Most people leave their work at the office.
We got 3 light rail cars.
All he wants to do is fix things.
So I got this 18-wheeler that's parked in this neighborhood, spewing fumes all over the place, but quite frankly, it's not a code violation. You know, I think I like helping around the house here.
Please re-elect Gerald. Please.
A man attacked me in a parking garage, tried to stab me with an 8-inch knife, but I carry a pistol. I fight back. That's why I'm still here. Every woman has a right to defend herself with a gun if she chooses. Hillary Clinton disagrees with that. Don't let politicians take away your right to own a gun. Donald Trump supports my right to own a gun.
Ladies, look at this face. And look at all of your faces. The face of leadership. The face of leadership in our party, the party of women's suffrage. The face of leadership in your communities, in your businesses, in your places of work and worship. Ladies, note to Democrat Party. We are not a special interest group. We are the majority of the nation. This is the face of a 61-year-old woman. I am proud of every year and every wrinkle.
In 2004, my son was stationed in Iraq. He saw a suicide bomber approaching his camp. My son moved forward to stop the bomber when the bomb exploded. He saved everyone in his unit. Only one American soldier died. My son was Captain Humayun Khan. He was 27 years old, and he was a Muslim American. I want to ask Mr. Trump, would my son have a place in your America?
All right. So there you go. Another question you might want to answer here. Which one was used the most for these political ads? And what does that say about us as human beings, that mode was used the most? I think an interesting conversation. Just think about it, and we'll talk about that when we see each other in class next. All right, so hopefully you understand a little bit about the three main rhetorical appeals, and we'll be doing some more political ad and commercial analysis of the three modes to make sure that we all understand them, because we're going to be applying these to the play Antigone that we're going to be reading, and the Shakespeare play of Julius Caesar. All right. This is another question that I'd like you to answer before you leave. Which mode of rhetoric do you think is the most powerful, the most persuasive, and why? That's another one I'm not going to have you answer in the text box right now, but just think about it. It's something we're going to talk about for our next meeting. And in our next meeting, we're going to watch this video, which is incredibly powerful and amazing, about Mr. Rogers and his rhetorical mastery. All right, I hope you have a lovely day.